Hi everybody. So first of all, I'd just like to say um, thank you basically to everybody that's been subscribing to my YouTube channel um, over this past month or so. It's just blown up. So overwhelmed with all support from everyone. Really appreciate you all. I'm just going to. So I've done this like quite a few times. I've done testimonies about what the Lord's been doing in my life, and then I've ended up deleting them. I don't know why. I just myself got better in me, and I've ended up deleting them. So I'm just going to do it again. So when I originally did the videos, I didn't really have that many subscribers or followers or anything on chat on my other socials, and like I say, it's grown massively. So this is for you guys, all my new subscribers and the people that don't know anything about my background or where I've come from, where the Lord's brought me to. So as a child, I was very mischievous, shall we say. I used to get involved in like just typical estate stuff. You know what estate kids do? Chucking little pebble, well, not the one really pebbles, stoning cars and stuff like that when we were little, because that's what we used to do. We used to go and hang about on the streets and just be proper little tow rags, you know what I mean? Not like nowadays where kids are sat on the phones. I don't know which one's better, to be fair, but yeah, that's how I was as a kid, and I was very easily led, shall we say. But also, I wanted to find things out for myself. If somebody told me about something, it'd be like within me to go find out that thing for myself. And that got me into a lot of trouble. Started basically pinching my granddad's cigs when I was like, I think I was blooming young, about 7 or 8, possibly even a little bit younger. I used to steal my granddad's cigarettes out of his packet. They were Berkeley Blacks, and my granddad used to smoke. Is it cat? I think it's Capstan Gold or whatever. Back when he was in RAF, and they were really strong. They had to ban them because they were that strong with Capstans. So my granddad smoked Berkeley's, but used to snap the filter off. And obviously, me being a young child, I used to steal his cigarettes, and I'd do the same thing. I'd snap the filters off, and I'd be smoking these Berkeley Blacks, and they were absolutely lethal. But so as I've started getting a little bit older, we moved away from where I used to live in West Riding, Shipley, and we moved to this area where quite a little village, nice little village, full of nice people. Had a bit of an underground drug scene going on. I quickly found it, and started basically smoking cannabis. I mean, the people that I was hanging about with, I've had time to look at it, and I don't blame nobody for it. It was all my fault. You know what I mean? My friends, they were a little bit older than me, but they were still children themselves. So total responsibility were on me. Started smoking cannabis. Basically doing whatever I could to get money for weed. Stealing, just carrying on being a little shit, basically, and it escalated to amphetamines, and then it were like slowly but surely I went through every single drug. I went through like amphetamines, ecstasy. Not really so much coke, because it wasn't really, it were about, but it was really, really expensive. It was like 120 quid a gram or something back in there when I were a kid, you know. So it wasn't, that wasn't really in our price range. But everything else were like fair game, do you know what I mean? And there were plenty of it around. So escalated through all them drugs, stayed on probably amphetamine pills for a couple of years, I'd say. Then heroin came on the scene, and crack cocaine came on the scene a little bit after. So as I was growing up, like I said, my friends were a little bit older. Some of them were coming back from raves and stuff like that, you know, ballers of Manchester, and they were coming back and they were on come downs. So to come down off of whatever they'd been taking, they were smoking heroin, and it, that's how it came into like our little circle like that. And at first it were a case of they won't let me anywhere near it, but I kept on pecking the reds out all the time and be like, go on, let me try it, let me try it, let me try it. And eventually they gave in, you know, and they let me try it. And it was, when I first had it, I didn't even like it. It was like, it made me feel violently sick or throwing up and that everywhere. But there was something in the back of my head. It's planted this little seed in the back of my head that even though I was telling myself that I didn't like it, I sort of knew that I was going to have it again. And it were very strange. It was very, very strange. But obviously, like as children like that, because we were only still kids, none of us really understood it. There weren't enough people that we hadn't been around people that had been on it for years and stuff like that. We didn't know the consequences, what came along with our choices at that time. Do you know what I mean? And it quickly became a case of it wasn't a choice anymore, because that drug took a grip of us, and it was like we needed it to function. The choice got taken away from us and we became addicts. Do you know what I mean? And then we were stuck in this. Some of my friends still are, my old friends still are stuck in that. You know, I'm fortunate to be where I'm at today. I managed to get out of that lifestyle, but you know, it was very much trapped in a lifestyle going around and around and around and around and around constantly, you know. And it were, if it wasn't heroin and crack, it was something else. It were never full abstinence from everything. I was always replacing it with something. And that went on for like 27 years, in and out of prison, on streets, homeless, you know, all of them things what go basically hand in hand with addiction, you know. So yeah, I tried everything to basically stop. You know, I tried getting with partners that didn't take drugs, that didn't that didn't drink and stuff like that. I even had children with two of them, you know, and even though I love my kids, it wasn't enough to break that cycle of addiction. You know, they weren't enough, even though I love them both. You know, it wasn't enough to break that cycle of addiction what I was stuck in. You know, I tried moving away, moving to different areas. I tried getting myself locked up and going to prison on purpose so that I could try and put that addictive lifestyle behind me. Again, didn't work. None of it worked. You know. Then one day I was in prison, and so as a kid, I did actually go to church. I went to Sunday school and stuff like that with my parents. And I had a basic understanding about Jesus and who Jesus is, but I didn't have a relationship with Jesus. I didn't know him, you know, but he knew me. So basically, I was reading this book in my cell, and my life were at a really, really low point at this stage, you know. I think I can't remember. I think it was roughly about the time my mum had just passed away through drinking. So I was basically in my cell reading this book called Once an Addict by Barry Woodward. And on the last page of this book, there's a prayer. So all throughout the book, right, it's about being trapped in that vicious cycle of addiction and what goes along with it, drug dealing and crime and everything like that. And all throughout this book, I'm thinking, this guy's wrote this book about me, you know. And I got to the last page, and as soon as I've read the last word in this book, I felt this energy enter my cell, and I could feel it in it. I could see it. It had changed the atmosphere in my cell. So it was like somebody had turned the sun up outside. Everything was really bright, and I could feel this overwhelming presence in my cell, and I could feel this presence surging through my whole body, through my feet, and everything coming up through the ground into my feet. And I burst into tears, started crying because of this presence in my cell with me. I didn't know at the time that who the presence was that were in my cell with me. I didn't understand it then, but I sort of knew that it was the Holy Spirit when I'd gone and stepped out of it and taken a look back and thought, yeah, do you know what I mean? And I knew from that point on that the Lord were with me. Now, I didn't leave prison and stop taking drugs straight away. You know, it went on for probably another 10 years after that, 8 to 10 years maybe. And I knew that, like I said, that the Lord were with me from that point, and He'd planted a seed in my head. I knew that one point I'd get to in my life where I'd be able to help other people with what I'd experienced, and I knew that's what the Lord wanted for me. So it was like, yeah, I just knew that He was with me. I knew that He'd get me to where I wanted to be, because even though I was stuck in addiction, I always wanted to use my knowledge to help other people. The only thing is I couldn't help myself, so I didn't know how to do that. So eventually I got to a point where I just had enough, and I thought, I need to be doing something different here. So I went into rehab, and I started looking at my life. I started looking at what it is that's actually wrong with me. That I started to have an understanding around addiction, around depression, around anxiety, around all of them things that were keeping me trapped. You know, even though I know today that the main one was the devil, because he had them chains around my life. But yeah, I had to look at all them elements first, you know. So I did that, and then I was in there for like 18 months, you know, and I thought, after 18 months, I thought, I don't need to be in here no more, even though it was a 27-year spiritual problem what I was trying to deal with. I thought that I had it boxed off within 18 months, and that old me took control again. It was like, I don't need to listen to anybody. I don't need to do anything what you're telling me, because I know better. And that's how I always was, you know. And sometimes I'm still like that today. It creeps in today, but I'm very aware of it, you know. So I left there, and left that rehab, and I were all right for a little bit, and then them old behaviours crept in again, and before I knew it, I'd relapsed, you know. So how I got into rehab in the first place was basically a worker at an organisation in Bradford. She never give up. She never give in on me. You know, she was always there when I didn't want her to be there. I was really, really poorly at this point. I was experiencing psychosis and everything, you know. I were hearing voices. I were petrified of my own flipping shadow. It was that scary, you know. And I seen things what people who've not experienced it could not even imagine. They couldn't even entertain it in their own heads. You know, things that one only caused through drugs, they were caused through letting darkness into my life. So yeah, this worker, she basically never given on me. She were always there. Every time I'd been out and scored drugs, I'd I'd go back to where I was living, and then there'd be a little knock on the door, and it'd be her, and I'd be like, "Your timing's impeccable." You know, it was like the Lord was sending her on purpose to see me right at them times. You know, and eventually she broke them barriers down with me, because I never really let anybody in. I used to think that, again, Danny behaviours, and not just Danny behaviours, addict behaviours. I used to think, there ain't nothing you can tell me about addiction. You haven't experienced what I've experienced, so you don't know what you're talking about. I felt like I was the only person in the world that were experiencing what I was going through, and nobody else understood. So for that reason, I had this barrier up where I wasn't letting anybody in. You know, she was persistent. She broke them barriers down, and I actually let her in, and she was like, "Right, Danny, we'll get you into rehab." That's how I initially got into rehab. And like I say, after the 18 months of me being in there and leaving, I found myself not doing what I should be doing, and them old behaviours again. Danny knows best. And I relapsed. So I was lucky, because I had this person, this worker, she was still around me. She was still like involved and stuff like that. So she ended up getting me back into sort of the same rehab, but a different part of it. And this other part of it involved going to church on a Sunday. You know, prior to this, I had actually been baptized. I did get baptized. I think it was while I was in the 18-month period where I was clean, but I wasn't doing what I should have been doing. I wasn't picking my Bible up. I wasn't, you know, having the Lord's armor on every day. I wasn't doing them things. So yeah, when I've come back into this other rehab, but I still had to do daycare at my old rehabs, because they'd run in conjunction with each other. I just wasn't living there like I used to. I used to live at the same place where I did the daycare, but on this occasion I'm living somewhere else and going there for daycare. So the somewhere else place, basically, part of it was to go to church. Like I said, I started actually delving into what the Lord says, what the Bible says, and I started actually, I got my baptism renewed, and then I started picking up my Bible every single day. And you know, there's very few days where I haven't picked my Bible up in the morning and done my Bible readings and stuff like that. Still areas what I need to work on, but I started building a relationship with Jesus, and he started showing me who I am, you know, and he started giving me strength. He started giving me strength through him. It's not my strength, you know, and that's why I was always trapped and all in addiction, because I used to try and do it through my strength, when my strength was never enough. Never, ever, ever enough, and it never will be enough, you know, to overcome them. The only strength that's ever capable of overcoming darkness like that, what had a grip on my life, is through Jesus, and that's it, you know. So like I said, started building a relationship with the Lord. I went to in the 18-month while I was first in rehab, I did my level 2 health and social care. I did my level 2 mental health, and then I started my level 3 health and social care. Then when I actually came back into rehab the second time, I finished off my level 3, and and then I started my level 4 counselling, which I'm currently on at the moment, counselling and applied psychology. So I'm going to be graduating in September from that. Well, it actually finishes in, I think we finish it in May. But obviously graduation's around September time, I believe. So what, mental, absolutely mental, graduating as a counselling psychologist. Where did that come from, Lord? But yeah, so I'm actually starting my level 5. I'm going to take it all the way to a bachelor's degree. At the moment I am, anyway. You know, if that's what the Lord wants me to do, then that's what'll happen. If it doesn't happen, it's not what the Lord wants for me. But yeah, I'll definitely be doing my level 5, I would have thought. But yeah, I just, I used to wake up in the morning where I'd be like, where am I getting money from today? How am I gonna fund my drugs today? That'd be the first thought on my mind, and then my next actual action would be getting up and going out and scoring. Today I wake up in the morning and I have this peace inside me where I know that, I don't have to think about that no more. I don't think about it anymore. The Lord's taken it all away from me. And I wake up with this unimaginable peace what Jesus gives me, and it's like, I don't even know how to explain it. It's like nothing that I've ever experienced in my life. Everything that I've experienced it's been like temporary. Do you know what I mean? There were always something missing, something in here that were missing. Everything else were temporary, whether it were women, drugs, money, whatever. It was a temporary fix, whereas the Lord has fixed that void inside me. Do you know what I mean? I don't seek things anymore. I still have, don't get me wrong, I still like to go out and do a little bit of shopping and stuff like that, but I work, and I'm entitled to do that. If I want to do that, I go out and I earn a wage, you know what I mean? So if I want to spend my wage on a few clothes here and there, I will. But it's not unhealthy behaviour, whereas like I used to always be seeking unhealthy behaviours all the time, constantly. And I don't do that no more. I put other people before myself. I didn't used to do that neither. It used to be all about me. What I could do for me, or what I could get for me. And never ever think about others. Addiction it's very, very selfish in it. And the Lord's taught me his way. I would like to think, I don't know what the Lord thinks about this, but I would like to think myself that I laid everything down and I started following him because I didn't have anything. Do you know what I mean? I had a blank slate, and I've started following Jesus from that blank slate. Do you know what I mean? And over time, he's started blessing me with things. So like stuff that's on my wrists and what have you, that's what the Lord's blessed me with. I built that up through following him. That's not something that I've specifically gone out and prayed about. I didn't say, oh Lord, give me this and this. I don't do that. I follow Jesus and I go out and I help other people. And by me doing that, the Lord blesses me. Do you know what I mean? Why I'm able to go out and buy loads of new clothes? Because the Lord blesses me. When it's the stuff there's stuff in my wardrobes and that where I end up taking them and I give them to people less fortunate. Now I'm not looking for no credit through that, obviously, but you know, it's just them little behaviours. I wouldn't have done that in the past. But yeah, giving my life to the Lord was the best thing I've ever done. It was the best decision I've ever made in my life. And it goes without saying, hands down, best decision I've ever made. I don't know what the Lord's got planned for me in the future. I don't know. That's up to him. But I know one thing. I'm excited about it, whatever it is. You know, I mean, look at my YouTube channel, for example. That's not me doing that. That's the Lord doing that. You know, I ain't doing it for me. I'm doing it for him. You know, because it's his platform. Everything that's on Breaking the Chains channel is the Lord's. It's the Lord's. It's sharing what he does for people, what he's done in my life, what he can potentially do in your life. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, if you're actually watching this video and you're considering like giving your life to Jesus, right, do it. My advice to you is do it, because it will be the best thing that you could ever do. You know, like, just one last thing before I go. So you know, when I was on about the void in here, so when this is my understanding of it. So in the beginning of time, when Adam and Eve were in the Garden of Eden, and Eve has took that fruit from the tree, what's happened is they've caused a separation between man and God, because we was created in the image of God. So we should never have been separated from him like we are, you know. And when they've took that fruit from the tree, they've separated us. So that's why all my life I have been seeking to try and fill something in here, this empty space, this void that we're in here. Tried filling it with other things. That is due to what Adam and Eve did. It's that separation from the Lord what puts that in you, you know. And you do that, you try and fill that void with sin, with sinful behaviors, with sinful nature, what also were put in us through Adam and Eve, you know. So yeah, that's my understanding of how it all started. Obviously I've got a bigger understanding of how it progresses from there, but I won't get into it on this video. But yeah, that's my understanding of how it all started and why I've been trapped in them behaviours for so long, seeking to fill this void inside here. And then the Lord comes along and bosh, fills that void what I tried to be filling with everything else, and nothing ever worked. And on that note, I'm going to leave it there. Thank you for watching, guys.